Well, everybody, welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm your moderator, Nick Palavita, and today we're going to be discussing a interesting topic that's not really focused tremendously on economics, but does have an economic bent to it. And here's the question that was posed on our Pod TV LinkedIn poll last week, which well over 1,000 people responded to, about 1,200. Should gun owners be required to carry insurance? In other words, the theory is, there was this Maine killings, which we all remember. And as a lawyer, okay, now everybody's dead. Who's going to pay for all this stuff? And if it was a personal injury, wrongful death, you go to the automobile policy, you go to homeowners policies. But if it's a gun death and there's no policy, who pays for all the victims? So anyway, we're going to look at that. By the way, Pod TV LinkedIn poll, 55% said yes, 45% said no. So it's kind of a split among whether or not they should be required to carry insurance. So with that, we're going to go into the Mediterranean. I wasn't sure if he's going to show up today, and bring in the Honorable David M. Walker. Where in the Mediterranean are you? Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego or David Walker?
I'm headed to Sicily tomorrow. Right now, I'm between the Balearic Islands and Sicily. I'm looking for the U.S. aircraft carrier task forces. We got a couple, but they're in the Eastern Med, we're wrapping up 10-day vacation cruise, if you will. But I can only be with you a few minutes. But if it's okay, Nick, I'll kick off a few comments.
Sure, go ahead.
Your question. My answer to your question would be no, you be required. But really what you have now is you have some jurisdictions, I think, for example, San Jose, California, that is requiring anybody who owns a gun within their geopolitical jurisdiction that they must buy insurance. And I think that's one way that they're trying to hedge against the Second Amendment fight. In the interest of full and fair disclosure, I do not own any handguns. But I do own an AR-9 rifle for defensive purposes, which is locked up in my home. Much less powerful than an AR-15, much cheaper, much shorter distance range than an AR-15, purely for defensive purposes. Now, we do have homeowners insurance. We also have, a supplemental policy, to be able to cover other types of liability, but they obviously have limits. And so, one of the questions is that depending upon what would end up happening, you could far exceed the limits that would be associated with a wrongful death. It's not clear to me what they're trying to get at here, but I'd be interested to hear from others.
Right. And I'd be interested to hear from others too. And since we have our panel here, I'm going to bring them on. First of all, a member of the Mega Society, which is the top 1 out of 1 million people on IQ tests, also a writer for Jimmy Kimmel Live. We're going to bring in Rick Rosner from Southern California. And then from Northern California, we have the head of the Eid Foundation, a FIDE chess master also, Jim Eid, and we can get their opinions on this. This came in from, we also have Sasha Starr coming in from Canada. So we have all these three. So here was the question, and we'll pose this to Rick since he was first up. Should gun owners be required to carry insurance? I didn't know they required that in California, so it may be a moot point.
So when it comes to anything with guns, it's what you can achieve legislatively. And right now we're at a legislative stalemate about non-controversial things because the U.S. House is not really functional right now. But with guns, the cows are all out of the barn. You've got about 450 million guns among 1/3 billion Americans. So well over 1 gun per American, though only 1/3 of Americans are in gun-owning households. So I mean, so yes, some states may pass individual things, but in terms of national policy, that making gun owners carry insurance is not achievable.
Yeah, we'll go to Northern California. Jim Mead, what are your thoughts on this issue?
Well, first off, I wanted to say I'm traveling too. Just held the first ever senior women's chess championship. And Nick and Sasha will know the winner, women's grandmaster Angelina Beloskaya. And she pulled it out in a stunning fashion. She was totally lost in the last round, but managed to come back and win and we were thinking of all tiebreakers and all this kind of stuff, but she made it simple for us. So it's not a Barbie shirt.
Just for the
I'm
record,
sorry,
you
David,
didn't
I-
compete. Just for
I
the
did
record,
not.
you were one of the competitors.
I was not, and I did not have a rooting interest publicly. I was providing commentary, and I was the primary sponsor of the event. But the organizer, Elizabeth Shaughnessy, is the picture on here, and she's a marvel. She built a building dedicated to chess in Berkeley, and when she started doing this years ago, I told her she was nuts, that it couldn't be done, it was too expensive, and she did it. So tip of the hat to Elizabeth Shaughnessy and all the women competing for the first ever U.S. Women's Chess Championship. And a question of gun control, I think David is just defined what a responsible gun owner is for us. And I think that David is not the majority of gun owners. So we have to think about the people besides responsible gun owners and what has happened in this country recently. And you take your pick of the horror that has been visited upon this country. You can go to, all sorts of different places, Texas, Buffalo, you name it. There has been some sort of horrendous gun death and caused by sometimes mentally unstable. So yeah, gun legislation has got to be on the agenda. And if you're part of a well-regulated state militia, I got no problem with you owning guns. But otherwise, I think it's more of a privilege than a right, and you have to have some sort of license, maybe insurance. These are not unreasonable demands upon someone who has a life, deadly, can carry a deadly weapon. And our country has seen how the lack of legislation has resulted in horror. Thanks.
Yes, David.
For the record, you do have to have a license. Some people who have guns don't have licenses because they didn't buy them legally. That's part of the problem that you have is law-abiding citizens and they end up buying guns purely for defensive purposes, might comply with the law, but there are plenty of other people that don't. In addition, as we've seen recently, we have red flag laws, the yellow flag law designed to try to keep guns out of the hands of people who represent a risk to themselves and a risk to society. But unfortunately, those laws don't always work, as was clearly the case in the recent tragedy in Maine.
Yeah, we'll go to Sasha Starr from Canada, which from my understanding has very strict gun regulations. What are your thoughts about having people that have guns carry insurance? Sasha.
I think that the gun lobby in the United States is so strong that unless there will be absolutely drastic development in the gun violence, for example, what's happened if every single day except Saturday and Sunday, there will be killing in schools, God forbid, and hundreds of children will be killed. Every day, Monday, 100 children killed. Tuesday, 150. Wednesday, 125. Thursday, 200. Friday, and it goes from week after week after week. If that scenario would ever happen, I think very, very quickly United States would come up with a new laws, legislation, and so on. Right now, the level of violence is still very low. I mean, for some other countries, maybe it's too high, but for the United States, it's too low to talk about any meaningful changes. That's my opinion.
Okay, we'll go to Jatovi McDuffie from Durham, North Carolina. What are your thoughts about our Pod TV poll? Should gun owners be required to carry insurance?
The answer is yes. The reason gun owners should be required. I'm on mute?
No, we can hear
He's
you.
frozen.
Oh, okay. Just to point out, gun owners should be required to carry insurance. The reason being because the amount of money that's put a strain
Yeah,
on
he's
our
breaking up.
medical industry based on gun violence alone needs to be compensated or needs to be buffered. The only way to do that is through insurance. Plus, adding insurance makes it into much more of a responsibility. The problem that we also run into with gun violence is that guns aren't seen as a responsibility in a lot of cases. Guns, there are just so many problems with guns that we just kind of ignore and gloss over, and we throw on the, oh well, it's mental health. Oh well, we don't want to harm the law-abiding citizen, but we forget that we have a problem with guns. Every country in the world has mental health issues. Every country in the world has all these problems that we have. We're the only country that actually has these gun issues. And the only way to, I guess, begin to attack those, we've got to change the mentality around guns. Yes, it's going to be expensive to carry a gun, but yes, you've got to register that gun. Yes, you've got to have insurance about it. Yes, you've got to be retrained on a regular basis about it. Yes, you've got to have a mental health screen on a regular basis about it. They're just things that we need to put in place because it is a weapon. There are weapons that are designed for self-defense. There are items that are honed to kill. A gun is honed. Its only purpose is to kill. It's not to maim. It's not to wound. It was designed to kill. So we need to have the utmost regulations around it, even insurance around that, to make sure that those wounded and harmed by it, by a stray bullet, are compensated and it doesn't create such a burden on our healthcare system.
Yeah, Rick Rosner has a response.
So for the past few years, America's averaged about 130 gun deaths per day, 48,000 per year, which is roughly the same number of people killed by cars in America. Though half of those gun deaths are suicides. But, everybody has to have car insurance. And we have to use cars every day. Guns are, not as an everyday essential, but they kill as many people.
Mm-hmm. Jatovi, you have a response.
One of the things that we always continue to jump to is always the deaths. And I think and the sad part about it, think about this. When you have that debate, people are numb to hearing about the numbers around deaths. That's sad. We should be shocked at that. I wish we would point out also the fact that over 100,000 plus are injured due to gun violence. So you add these numbers up, there's a ton more people that are affected by gun violence. And then if you talk about the psychology around someone being harmed, somebody being injured, if, for example, we're all witnesses, we're all at dinner right now. Say we're all at dinner, and then Mark, you know how rowdy he gets into a fight. That fight just doesn't affect Mark and that individual he's in a fight with. That affects all of us as well. So when that gun violence happens, even though I'm a bystander and I see it, I'm affected by it. So we just can't think about, it doesn't really bother anybody. No, you have people running when they hear a pot drop. That's a problem.
Yes. David.
Yeah.
Hey, Jatovi, just a really quick
First,
question, because I actually saw something earlier today.
Whoa, please don't jump in. I got to go. First, I don't agree that the sole purpose for a gun is killing. You can have a gun for defensive purposes. It's how you aim the gun that determines whether or not you kill. And one of the things that obviously we need to have is much better training. I think, frankly, in all too many cases, we have even law enforcement people that are shooting to kill rather than basically to disable the person. So that's different. Secondly, you have Second Amendment issues, which you're not going to end up undercutting. And then you have issues by various jurisdictions to try to increase the cost of owning a gun and therefore to potentially try to discourage gun use. Such is the case, I think, with regard to requiring insurance. But as long as the the requirements are not unreasonable, I don't think they'd be held to be unconstitutional. And then one of the other questions is to what extent do your current policies cover any of this? To what extent does your homeowner's policy cover this if you're using it for defensive purposes? To what extent does your umbrella policy for liability cover this? I don't know the answer to those questions, but you also have to analyze the statistics. How many of the gun deaths are due to illegal gun owners? How many of the gun deaths are due to handguns rather than rifles? How many of the killings are due to people that frankly caught with red flag and yellow flag laws and mental? We clearly need. I'm not trying to say that we don't, but if you think we're ever going to repeal the Second Amendment,
Yep. Jatovi.
Just to point out, these are some of the fallacies that we have to get rid of. We have to get rid of the shoot to wound. That is something I've had plenty discussions with many police officers who are in my family and outside of my family who I'm closely related to. That is a fallacy that we keep putting out there that's saying, oh, well, police officers I need to learn and be trained better to shoot to wound and not shoot to kill. That's just an impossibility. That's, you're using a gun to kill. You're using a gun to, yeah, sure, self-defense, but a gun was honed and designed to kill. It wasn't a hammer. It's not a knife. It's not anything else. It was honed and designed to kill in the most efficient way possible. So we have to get rid of the fallacy that, okay, well, we shoot to wound. Well, we got to train better. And then we also have to realize that, yes, it is for self-defense. Everybody understands that people feel that that's a defense thing, but you also got to train that there are other ways to self-defense. The best actual form of self-defense, you can have a pet. A dog is actually a better self-defense tactic than an actual gun because you're not going to be turned on by your own dog. You're going to be turned on by the gun that the individual takes away from you. That's one of the statistics that they talk about with women actually owning guns, is because that is also a safety risk because the individual, the perpetrator, ends up taking the gun away and utilizing the gun on the individual. So there are a lot of problems that we've really got to be honest about when we have these gun discussions and gun talks, because there are things that we get so emotional and so tied in, and I'm going to dig into Second Amendment. You can't take my gun away. We got to get out of that and have a legitimate discussion. Right now, guns are the number one killer of kids. So are we saying that we can't do anything about it? We can't make the red flag laws are only in 21 states right now. We can't make that fully across the board. The statistics, we're going to get so petty and picky over handguns and this. Well, technically, if we want to get that petty, handguns are the only ones that are protected by the Second Amendment based on the Supreme Court ruling that Scalia brought about years ago. So that is the only actual one that's protected by the Second Amendment. So when we complain about assault rifles and all this, that we can't have that, it's not protected. The only thing, and then when we look at statistics, when they removed the assault rifles ban, guess what happened? Mass shootings skyrocketed. But no, we don't want to talk about that because, I want this gun. You're going to take away all my gun. That's ridiculous. We have to have a legitimate discussion and take away the emotions and look at the problem and stop running from it.
Mark.
Mark. I think you muted me. There we go. A couple of things that I was getting ready to say, and all along those lines is one, I agree with what Toby said, because I actually have a cousin that is a GBI officer, and he actually raised the same point that Jacoby raised, because he actually told me that this whole notion of shoot to maim is a non-starter, because a lot of times if you shoot to maim and all in that space, they will oftentimes be very much up on adrenaline, and you can actually put yourself in greater danger and all along those lines. So that is something that my, like I said, cousin Johnson brought to my attention. It was actually doing one of our famous cases. I think it might have been Trayvon Martin or one of the others, and all along those lines. So definitely that is something that I think we need to be aware of and be having the conversations about. And also to your other point, a lot of times we leave, if we have guns, them in unsafe places unsecured. There are a number of PSAs that talk about that because sometimes kids are naturally curious and they will go investigate. And if they are not secure, then that is where we oftentimes will find kids that get the guns, and then we'll find a use for the gun and all in that space. By the way, Jacoby, I have seen some dogs turn on their owners and everything. So I'm not sure that I 100% agree with that comment and everything, but it's not as dangerous as the guns and all along those lines. But I did have a question for everybody, including Jacoby, based on something that I saw earlier today and all in that. And that is, with the gun violence, there is this notion of putting out in the paper the homicide, the victim's name, and the name of the person that was accused, and in some cases even convicted and everything. I saw that recently here in our local paper. They literally have a triangle homicide watch where they will tell you when the homicide happened. I think there were 2 here in Durham over the weekend and all along those lines. So I just wondered, does that help the cause or does that hurt the cause? Because I'm thinking like that might actually be in some ways a deterrent, but in some ways it might not be all that great for the greater cause and everything in that space. So any thoughts around that, both Rick and Jim, and even
Rick Rousner.
So yeah, everybody's in their information bubble. I don't. Few people read the newspaper. It's, the newspapers are like landlines. They're for older people at this point. One thing that Second Amendment people like to say is enforce existing laws, and that is one area where we could do a lot better. Everybody in that town that had had contact with the main shooter knew that he was building up to kill a ton of people, and nobody was able to, or everybody dropped the ball. Uvalde, where they took an hour to go, I mean, that's not a law issue, that's a chicken shit law enforcement issue. They took an hour to go in because they were afraid of the guy's AR-15. But there are plenty of laws on the books that are enforced haphazardly, and we could do a much better job with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, I do tend to lean toward what Jacoby says, at least in my analysis. One problem you have in an auto accident, okay, that people get in accidents, people get killed, people get maimed, people get injured. As an attorney, your job is to clean up the streets. I think the best education, if you want to go to law school, is be a waiter at a restaurant, because you're always cleaning up people's messes. They think it's a wonderful profession, but basically you're cleaning up the mess. When a shooter goes and kills people, the first thing you look at is how do you compensate the victims? In the main shooting, there was one lady who had 3 children. Her husband's dead. Breadwinner's gone. Where's the compensation fund in this particular case to take care of the 3 kids and the victims that are out there? And frankly, there isn't any. Without having an insurance policy in place, the attorneys go, well, who do we sue? Who do we collect? We can't sue from the person who did the shooting because they're dead and they're broke. So there's no place. So you're on your own, and too bad for you, and too bad for your kids, and too bad for everybody. Well, if it was an auto accident, guess what? And the same thing happened. Husband was killed and she's left with 3 children. You get to go after the policy, the auto policy, and you get at least PPI insurance out of it. So you have some compensation for the victims. Under our current situation, we have no compensation fund for the victims, leaving the attorneys and the victims basically another victim of the shooting. So not only is the person dead who's a victim, but also all the other people that surrounded these shootings are. And until we force mandatory gun insurance like we have auto insurance, it's going to be a very bad situation for the victims. There's nothing you can do with the people that are dead. They don't need compensation. They'll be buried and gone. But it's all the other people that are surrounding this that need to have some form of compensation for the loss of these individuals. And right now we don't have anything at all. We don't even have a discussion. I do want to thank the LinkedIn polls, because even though they're not accurate, the Pod TV LinkedIn polls, they do tend to have a good indication of what people think around the country. It's 55-45 in favor of having a gun insurance. Right.
But think about something. The Hamas fighters, they didn't have any insurance for using guns, and they were shooting, maiming all kind of civilians. And it seems to me.
Well, I mean, but they should have. I mean, but you remember the Hamas fighters that came across the border and stuff like that. This is what we call a terrorist. See, even if you do create a policy where you have to have gun insurance, trust me, not everybody's going to buy guns. You're going to have uninsured gun owners. Like, no kidding. Even today, lawyers face what they call uninsured motorist. You think that person who just rammed you in a car has insurance. They don't. And so you actually have to carry, believe it or not, uninsured motorist insurance, because not everybody who's on the road today will actually have an insurance policy. But what the insurance policies do, it creates a fund for the victims, because look at the Maine shooting. Okay, all those people are dead. They're no longer victims. They're dead. They're buried. It's over. But all the people that are alive, the family members, the children of the family members, the children of the people that got killed, these are all victims that there is no compensation for. The attorneys are going, okay, can we go after the homeowner's policy? Well, maybe not. It doesn't cover it. Okay, can we go after? Well, there is no policy. Do we have to sue the city of Lewiston? In other words, now all of a sudden they're in some really tough litigation. Who created the fault? Is it the city? Should they sue the department? You created a situation where it's quite possible. Damnamesque injuria, wrong without a remedy. A wrong was created, and there is no remedy for the victims without having an insurance policy. But currently also, there's no conversation in the United States about forcing gun insurance on gun owners. And I think that's wrong. They should be mandatory gun insurance. Yeah.
Jim is next.
Yeah, Jim's up.
Oh, yeah, Jim Mead. Sorry, Jim. You're next.
All right. Yeah, what I was trying to say earlier is that, my point about we require licenses was not to indicate that we don't. We do. And this is not an infringement on your Second Amendment rights. So throw that argument out. And insurance falls in the same thing, as long as it isn't punitive. It's not a Second Amendment question. And so why would we want this? Of course, there are criminals. Of course, none of our legislation is going to do away with criminals. What we're talking about now, we're bringing up Maine. Well, what about Buffalo? What about the elementary school kids that were killed in Connecticut? I mean, we can list them one by one, and they're all horrific. And the point is that we're at loggerheads and we're not doing anything about it. And we need to get our acts together and do something about it. And what is that? Well, why would insurance help? It's some of the things that Nick pointed out that would help. But another thing was insurance companies don't want to pay claims. So they would all of a sudden be a legislative force with sensibility. Excuse me. And once you get them on your side, then you have some balance. So some of the politicians that are being influenced by gun right owners and gun right advocates, they would be offset by insurance advocates.
I'm familiar with that lobby. Pretty good lobby. But you also brought up another.
I wasn't finished, but go ahead.
No, go ahead. One point is accidental deaths. Believe it or not, they do take place through guns. My cousin accidentally killed his.
That wasn't my point, Nick. I want to finish my point.
Hey, let him finish his point.
Yeah. The other thing is when we have these acts of violence, these gun violence, Toby touched on it. These are traumatic events. It's not the number of deaths that we talk about. It's all of the families that are related to them. And all of them have experienced the trauma that will influence the rest of their lives. So when we're tabulating numbers, don't forget you're undercounting by an order of magnitude. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you, Counselor. Rick Rosner, you have something.
So we should look at the AR-15s, the AK-47s. 60 years ago, there were 0 of these in private ownership in the U.S. Now there are about 17 million of them. And those things were developed to be, war weapons to not just kill, but to create devastating wounds, because in war, you want to create wounds in your opponent that require 3 or 4 people to drag that person out of the battle and to give them care. And so these weapons, you might focus on them for carrying extra insurance. There are types of weapons, guns that are illegal, Tommy guns of the 1930s, fully auto machine guns. So you can do things at some point, and nobody's calling for Tommy guns to be made illegal again.
Just to point out, there are people who are, because you still have people fighting to this day, those same gun rights activists. Like, a gun deserves a right. It's an item. I'm not a chair rights activist. That's crazy. So the people, there are people who are diehard into gun rights and are begging for the Tommy gun and are begging for all guns to be, not regulated and all this and that and the other thing. I mean, yes, they're the extremes, but again, to get back to what Jim was talking about, Jim, again, yes, the insurance will balance it out. And then what Jim is talking about is, yes, we really have to have a serious conversation about it, and I'm glad that's kind of what we're going through here, and not getting into the fallacies and the law-abiding citizens, and because these are all things that are they're going to come and take your rights away. I'm not taking your rights away. Just to register your weapon so we know if it's stolen, then okay. Right now, if you get, I think now, Nick, you can back me up on it. I don't know if it's a national or a federal law, but a bar, if they overserve an individual and that individual goes out and commits a drunk driving accident, can't that bar? That's
called Dram Acts, and the Dram Acts vary from state to state.
Yeah.
In other words, if you serve too many alcoholic beverages to an individual, and then they run out and they get in an accident and they kill somebody, the bar owner could actually be held liable. It's a state by state issue. Most crimes are state by state issues, so you have to look at your own state laws and consult your own attorney regarding that. The problem that I have as an attorney is that attorneys in general are called in afterwards to, quote, clean up the mess. And the mess in Lewiston, there's a lot of messy people out there and a lot of victims. And the first thing you do as a lawyer, you go, well, what insurance policy can I go make a claim for to give the victims some compensation? And if it's an automobile accident, you have the automobile policies, and sometimes you collect a whole bunch of policies. You have a gun claim, and you go, what do you do? Go, you tell the lady and his kids, well, you're tough out of luck. Too bad they just didn't get run over. Your husband didn't get run over by a car. Yeah, Rick.
I worked in bars for 25 years, starting in 1980. And when I started, bars were insane, like injury manufacturers. I worked in one bar that had forfers. Like, what you pay for one drink, you get 4 drinks. And I worked in the bar that served the most drinks ever served in a bar in one day, 50,000 drinks, this giant beer garden. And people started looking at the carnage caused by drunk driving, and they came up with legislative solutions, and things are better now. Now, the function of bars has changed. Before the internet, that's where you had to go to get laid. But so now you go to a bar with your friends to pay $16 for an artisanal cocktail. But still, like, drunk driving is much improved because of legislation and social engineering.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mark.
Yeah, I had a question for you, Nick, because it's something that I was part of when I was traveling and actually managing a music group, and we went to Ohio, and I didn't think that these things still existed. But what is the legal right of folks that are actually literally giving away guns? Because one of the things that I've always been curious about is, and I know it happens here in North Carolina, it happens in a number of other places, is this notion of a gun raffle. So literally they will raffle off a gun and all in that space, and apparently it's legal and all in that space. I don't think that they necessarily check the person that wins the prize and all along those lines. So because I actually just looked it up to make sure there wasn't something from back in the 80s that wasn't happening now. But even the NRA was literally doing a NRA sweep gun raffle, and there were some other ones that I saw that were in the year of 2022 and 2023. So apparently it's a popular fundraising effort that you can literally raffle off a gun, and I'm thinking that the winner might not even be criminally checked. So is this something that we need to look at as well? Because apparently there's the allure of winning a gun in a gun raffle.
Yeah. Well, again, most laws relating to crimes are state laws. So you have to look at your individual state laws. Federal crime laws are actually far and few between. But what the conversation is in terms of getting car insurance, which everybody carries except the uninsured motorists, the people that actually don't carry it because they're just scofflaws. In the world of guns and gun violence, which if 130 people a day die of gun violence, there should be a victims compensation fund where else basically gun insurance, just like you have automobile insurance to compensate the victims. Because what happened in Maine, there are a lot of victims out there. Their spouses, maybe not even children. Somebody died and the spouse relies on them for their living, and that person was the breadwinner. Now, where do you go to be compensated so that you can live the rest of your life? And there are quite a few victims that take place in this country every year, and we do mandate automobile insurance for everybody who drives an automobile. We don't mandate gun insurance for everybody who owns a gun, and there could be accidental discharge. If these AK-47s and AR-15s are out there, Rick, then what happens is they buy insurance too, but their rates will be higher, assuming when the actuaries do their statistics, see that the death rates are higher on those types of weapons than there are other types of weapons. So the insurance industry is really good at assigning risk and loss. Yeah, Jim.
Rick, I think you had your hand up first. I'll go after you.
No, go ahead. I have to remember what I was going to say.
Well, I think the whole insurance argument, comes down to, can we get legislation and get the insurers on our side? But let's get real here. As a white male living in the suburbs, what we thought. I'm saying this generally because I can talk about my cast. We thought this gun problem was really inner city Black problem. We didn't. It's not going to affect me. So if Black people are killing Black people, what do I care? And so if we get real about this, we're now seeing it affecting white communities, white elementary schools, and all of a sudden there's more outrage. So let's connect the dots here, and it's not something we can ignore anymore. Just even if you're one of those people that doesn't care about what's going on in the urban environments in our country. Thanks.
Oh, by the way, before we get to Jatovi, another lobby that you'll get to join you if you get this insurance pass is ALTA, the American Trial Lawyers Association. It's one of the strongest lobbies in the country. In other words, because the reason they'll favor this is the trial lawyers make a lot of money off the settlements of. In other words, as an attorney, you're going, well, gosh, if they actually pass this law, yeah, we'll get the victim's compensation, but I'm going to get 25 to 33% of the amount that goes through as my commission. So you'll get all the American Trial Lawyers Association on your side.
Without any of us suffering.
Without ever suffering. Right.
Jatovi?
Pass a mandatory insurance law, like no kidding.
I was just going to say, Jim, on that get real part that you were talking about. Well, think about when the gun laws really picked up. Was around the time when more African Americans started picking up guns. So yeah, there is a racial tinge to it, but also gun laws do affect the Black community, and there are gun owners who are Black, and so yeah, it does affect them as well. But the problem is, again, we get tied into these fear tactics. And even in the Black community, we get tied into these fear tactics that, hey, I'm going to need a gun because I'm going to need this AR-15, or I'm going to need this Bushmaster or whatever, because who's coming after you? The mob? What gang? I mean, half the time these individuals live in great neighborhoods who have all these 50,000 guns, and then the first thing that they run to is I can need it for self-defense. Well, you've never used it. And you go out here just to shoot anything under the sun, and you can't use it for hunting. So yeah, I mean, insurance is a must. And I think that would cut down on a lot of the extra, the 50 instead of somebody buying one gun saying, because okay, one gun, I can hear you, you're saying you're for self-defense. 5, you're not using that for self-defense. That's an obsession. And then Mark, you touched on the gun giveaways. That's part of a sickness that we have in our country around guns, that gun idolatry, where it's an actual religion and not an actual, responsibility.
So to Toby, along those same lines, I was actually going to read the tease and hopefully it'll come on and everything along those lines. So you mean to tell me that you're not going to be going and trying to get one of these lovely, hottest guns, greatest gear, and all of that? Because this is actually the NRA raffle that is currently taking place. As you can see, there's all kinds of great guns that you can go get and everything along those lines. So this is literally what they are raffling
that trophy
off.
on your wall.
Put it in bikinis and you got an ammo-sexual.
I got to get that image out of my head.
Well, I mean, the thing is, if you're in the country, I mean, I used to own a whole stack of these guns. I had 22 shotguns, 357s, 44 semi-automatics, 22 semi-automatics, you name it. Because you're in the country, you go hunting and shooting with it. Okay. If there was gun insurance, it would cut down on the amount of guns I would own because I'd have to pay premiums every year and the type. I mean, seriously, the 45 semi-automatic was a great gun, but probably a very dangerous gun to just carry around. Same with 357. So what would happen is I'd go, do we really need all these guns if I had to pay insurance premiums on each one of the bloody guns that I own? So and frankly, I had people come by my house. There could have easily been an accident. Somebody could have got killed. Because they just pick. So many people came by. Oh, I know how to use these. They literally would point loaded guns at me. I'm going like, dude, don't do that. And yes, my first cousin did kill his best friend accidentally when they went out hunting and they were cleaning their guns. This happens quite often, and then all of a sudden it discharged. Didn't know it was loaded, and boom, blew the guy's head off. I mean, so things like that do happen, and we do not have gun insurance for the victims. But go on, Rick.
The average gun-owning household owns 8 guns, which is fine if you like guns, except that the deal is that it's the more guns you have, the harder it is to keep track and secure each gun, especially if you have kids in the house. Now, the NRA is a corrupt organization that functions off of fear that people are going to come for your guns and constantly fighting every little bit of anything that they think is gun control. They fight legislation to to limit silencers, to limit guns in the hands of the mentally ill, to require gun locks so that the only person who can use the gun that won't fire for anybody but the actual owner of the gun, which is well-established technology that no major gun manufacturer will put on their guns because of the hate from Second Amendment people.
They fought studying gun violence. You can't even get a legitimate study on gun violence getting funded, a federally funded study, because the NRA and the gun lobbies have fought against it, because we know it's an epidemic in our country, gun violence.
But Jacoby, there have been studies, and they show that if you are a gun owner, you're less safe.
The government, until the government's not allowed to fund gun studies, the CDC is not allowed to do gun studies.
I don't know why you guys are so far against the NRA. Oh, by the way, this message is brought to you by the National.
By the NRA.
The NRA, like Wayne LaPierre and his buddies live high on the hog. They've been sued by the state of New York for being a corrupt organization, and they had to, I think, declare bankruptcy and move their headquarters out of New York.
They did. And it's a bureaucracy like any other, that once it gets out of control, then the organization, which whatever it was founded for, whatever ideals they had, it's no longer what's going on.
Until recently, you couldn't sue gun manufacturers. They had been so effective in lobbying Congress that you couldn't sue them. And you know, there's an argument for that they just make the guns. They're not the ones killing people with them. But when you look at gun manufacturers and their advertising that having an AR-15 means you have big balls. And if you Google the lives of the gun manufacturing families, they're not the best people, and they kind of know what they're doing.
Hey, Rick, just really quickly, I have a question. It's actually for one of our other panelists, but I was going to make a statement first. But there looks like there is a prize here. It's the first prize at that whole NRA raffle, 11 gun collection, but they're going to give you a Browning Ultra gun safe with that. But for the second prize, they're going to give you 8 guns with no safe. That makes no sense to me. And all along those lines, so you can have the 11 guns with the safe or the 8 guns at second prize with no safe, because there's no safe included in that second prize. And you have choices. If you don't want the guns, you can get a like a vehicle, like a all-terrain vehicle, or you can get a Colorado elk hunt for 2 in their first prizes. So they got various prizes.
Reminds me of the old joke. The first prize is 1 week in Philadelphia. Second prize is 2 weeks.
Exactly. But my question that I was going to ask, and this was actually to Sasha and everything, was we are talking about the NRA, and a lot of this conversation is the conversation that goes on here in the United States. And as one that has not visited, even though I do have relatives in Canada enough, is the NRA have that same kind of presence in Canada, or is it a lesser of an issue? Because I know y'all still have the Mounties and other things that are going there, but is the NRA active in Canada?
I don't know if I have the right answer to that. All I know is that I have many Jewish friends who are now taking licenses and who are buying guns. So obviously the guns will become more popular in Canada in the near future. But I had a question to Nick. You have apparently 8 different rifles, and if there would be an insurance, then probably you would sell half of those, right? If not more.
No, I got rid of all of them many years ago, Sasha, when I went to law school, and also the place out in the country was eventually sold. And also when I found the people that came by had really no clue what they were doing. And when it came to handling a gun, they had no idea how dangerous these things were. So I disposed of my arsenal, but it was pretty cool when I was a kid or younger, because
I see. Sorry, I
missed. You know, shooting these weapons is, I hate to say it, it's a lot of fun.
For some reason, I saw that you still have them. Well, okay, but there are a lot of people who have definitely more than one.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
3, 4, 5, 8, whatever.
Sure.
So if this legislature about mandatory insurance, many of those people would not have to, but would choose to sell at least half their collection. Don't you think then the prices on secondary market for used guns would drop next to zero, because there will be too many people wanted to unload their collection or part of their collection, and very few people would be willing to buy them.
Yeah.
By the way, the license,
modern economy there.
No, but I'm wondering, to insure the brand new gun and used gun, would it be the same rates?
Probably not. I don't know.
Well, they say the insurance industry, because there would be bidders on those, would set the rates just like they do in automobile insurance. You have a lot of companies compete for your automobile insurance today. A lot of and companies would actually, the property and casualty companies would compete for your insurance business on your guns, but obviously they're going to assess you as a risk, because they don't want to pay a claim because one of your guns was used to commit a crime. It's just like auto insurance.
Exactly.
They inspect you to make sure that you are a person that is a risk for them, that they don't have to collect on. But,
so there could be implications that insurance company can raise their prices for your
they can. In other words, let's say if you're a gun owner in Podunk, Nebraska, and you have 8 guns, your liability is probably a lot less, because you're living in the middle of nowhere by yourself. You have 8 guns, the insurance will be relatively inexpensive. You're a gun owner. Yeah, but
I'm
you're a gun owner.
apologizing to people of Nebraska for you.
Yeah, but let's see if you're a gun owner in, let's say, Philadelphia. I'm gonna pick on that.
Okay.
And you have the same 8 guns. Okay, the insurance is going to be a lot higher because the insurance companies are going 8 guns in Philadelphia. What are we using? What do you need 8 guns for? There aren't that many buffalo in Philadelphia. You see what I mean? So the insurance industry is not stupid when it comes to actuarially determining the cost. But either case, if there was an accident in Nebraska or an accident in Philadelphia, somebody got injured. Now you have a fund for the attorneys and the victims to go to get compensated, rather than they're sitting there going, do we have to sue the city of Lewiston? Do we have to sue a first responder? Do we have to sue somebody who talked to the person that was mentally ill? In other words, lawyers are running around with their chickens with their head cut off because the victims are sitting there going, I'm starving. My husband died. I'm starving. The three orphans that just took place. What are you going to do for us, Mr. Lawyer? And you tell them, can't do anything for you. You're screwed. You know, that's not right. That's not right. So if you own a gun, you should be able and willing to pay for insurance for the gun, just like I pay auto insurance. I have
a question for you. I have a question for you, Nick, on that same basis and all along those lines. And this is actually for both you and Jatovy and everything. But there are a number of toys and things that are out there that look very realistic. So where would the insurance fit into that conversation? Because you have definitely seen some of the toys that kids get that can look very realistic and all in that space. So where would the insurance fall in that line? Because
the toys,
there's some guns that look almost like the real thing.
Yeah, toys would not be insured because no one can kill somebody with a toy. But the thing is, people that are handling guns are going to get insurance. And the people go, what about police officers? Well, when I was on our HOA board, we had our security officers without guns. If we brought them guns, we were required to buy insurance for our security officers. It was expensive. And the reason why? The security officer could accidentally, kill somebody, bang, because they go, well, I thought the person was committing a crime. I didn't.
Then your homeowners association would be on it.
Exactly. So we had to buy insurance for security officers. It is ridiculous to think an individual can get away with not carrying insurance when all police officers, security officers, everybody else who carries a gun has to carry insurance. But me, because I'm an individual, I have the right to carry a weapon without insurance. Baloney. Go on, Rick.
But is there a legislative path to have this happen in red states? Like, I can't imagine Arkansas, governed by Sarah Huckabee, passing any of this stuff.
The thing is, if some states don't have it, let's say Arkansas doesn't have it, then what will eventually come out through the media, let's say Maine passes it. Maine should be right to pass it now. Then they'll say, well, the next time something happens, the insurance company pays. Then Arkansas, let's say they don't pass it, which wouldn't surprise me. The next time, and there's going to be a murder in Arkansas, the press will bring out, and none of the victims got compensated because Arkansas is a backward state, which we all know, and doesn't have gun insurance. In other words, they'll be looked down upon by the other states, which they currently are anyway. In other words,
where was Columbine?
Where to live? Arkansas will not be on your bloody list.
Where was Columbine?
Colorado.
Columbine was in Colorado. See, Colorado could have passed this a long time ago.
Right.
Every state has the right and should pass it. And if Maine doesn't pass
Connecticut
Colorado's had a ton. Colorado had the Batman murders. Colorado had the King Super grocery store murders.
You're right.
But every state's had a bunch.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but the thing is, do they have an insurance policy to cover the victims? Probably not, even in Colorado, because people would rather talk about solutions than finding solutions. And this is one solution, at least for the victims.
It's the lobby, Nick. It's the lobby, and that's why we got to get the insurance lobby on our side and the trial lawyers on our side.
Yeah, well, you would get 2 lobbies on your side, Jim.
Right.
And then you're going
to get legislation passed.
Let me tell you when ALTA will come on board. The minute, let's say they had this in Maine, and now the PI attorneys would be all over it. Oh, you got injured in a gun accident, call the law firm of James and
Yeah.
Jones. Like, ring, ding. Okay. 'cause
Smith
the
and
thing is-
Wesson, the law firm.
yeah, because law firm gets a commission on it. Ding, we'll get a policy, we'll get collection for you. And when that happens, then all the Alta attorneys will start lining up in favor of this, and you're going to see a change in how guns are handled in the
Hey,
United
Nick, would you collect money as
Alta
they
is a
shoot
very
this?
powerful lobby. Don't underestimate them. You know,
Hey, Nick,
American
would you get
trial lawyers.
claims? Would you get claims if the guns were like those guns right there and everything? Because, like I said, those are
Can't see them
actually
yet, Mark. They're air.
Yeah, right. Well, the thing is, see, they would have different insurance rates, but see, these are if these are toy guns, they would be excluded because they don't have any possibility to injure. or
Well, they
kill
sure
anybody.
do
So-
look real. Most of
they
them.
just
Yeah,
don't
they do
look
look
real.
real.
Those
The
are
only
toy guns, and they
thing
look
is
very real
that-
to me.
The only danger of these is you get shot by somebody who has a gun, thinking you have a gun, and you don't.
Yeah,
You
that's
just have
the
a toy.
point. Or I have
that
a
was
heart
kind of the
attack
point I
and
was
someone
making.
points it at me.
Yeah, but these do look pretty bad, Mark. I can tell you that. Yeah, Rick.
I imagine a future in which we're safe from gun violence. And what happens is scientists figure out a genetic tweak that turns our skin into Kevlar.
Just at the
Yeah,
time we're safe.
yeah. You know, I don't know what the future is going to be, but right now, all I see is people doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, and they haven't even brought up the idea of gun insurance. And I didn't hear any. I heard about the victims, but I didn't hear anyone say, "Well, the attorneys are going to file suit against the, John Jones Insurance Company to pay the claim for the 3 young children that have to now grow up without a father and without money to provide for
No,
them."
you're-
Jim
Yeah,
and
We
Nick,
heard a
is that
lot
the
of
difference?
talk about this after 9/11, the Victims' Compensation Fund. There was a lot of discussion about how much each victim's life was worth, whether a
It's-
stockbroker's life was worth more than a janitor.
But rather than that, when you have insurance, they basically tell you what your life is worth.
Yeah.
They
If
do
you're
the
injured in an
actuarial
auto
studies.
accident- What?
But there should be talk of we don't hear the costs. Like
Yeah.
Uvalde, where the kids got killed, they have to build a whole new school because that other school is just tainted with the deaths of those. And
Yeah.
that's, what is that? $12 million just for the school, not to
Yeah.
mention, the lifelong damage to the families. We don't hear any of the numbers involved. And
Right.
you're right. We should hear more about how much the 18 murders in Maine, plus the people wounded, will cost the families and the city over the next 20, 30, 50 years. And it's got to be like, I don't know, over $50 million.
Yeah, it's in
You're right.
millions of dollars, and that's the reason it was on economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, and it's also the reason we're out of time. And we'll see you next week with another major economic topic. Until then, have a good week. Bye bye.